Hi, my name is Susan Cranston, and I'm the host of Authentik You, a talk show that features real people in our community who've made changes in their life, either personally or in their career, to find a more authentic path. And that path is often a journey that's full of new beginnings. In many cases, it involves change. And sometimes that change can seem really good, particularly when you're the one making the change. For example, when you decide to buy a new home or move to a new city. In other cases, change can seem stressful, frightening, and disconcerting because it's brought upon you, and sometimes in very surprising and alarming ways. I was at a session the other day and I heard this really interesting quote. It made me chuckle, and it was about change. And the quote went something like this: "I'm all for change. I think it's fabulous as long as I don't have to do anything differently." And a part of that same discussion I was having, well, I was reminded of the Stanford address in 2005 that Steve Jobs, the founder of Apple, gave to the graduating class. And in his message, he talked about 3 specific stories, and all of them really involved change. One was when, as the founder of Apple, at the age of 30, he was basically fired from his job. So he experienced change that was brought upon him in a way that was very, very public and very humbling and very upsetting for him. But he realized that inside him, he still was following a very authentic path and doing what he loved, so he started a new company called Next. And that led him back to becoming the founder of and rejoining Apple again several years later. But he realized that even though in that transition, that change that happened to him, even though it seemed like the worst thing possible, it turned out to be the best thing in his life because of the learning that he gained along the way. So that's going to be the topic of our show today, and I'm absolutely delighted to introduce you to our guest, Nahla Kor from Kor Capabilities Consulting. And I had the pleasure of meeting Nahla through the Greater KW Chamber of Commerce. She's actually the chairperson of the Women's Leadership Committee. And so I've had an opportunity to connect with her at several events, watch her in leadership roles, help us manage through change, and she's an expert at this. And so I'm delighted to have her on the show today. Welcome, Nahla.
Thank you, Susan.
Thanks for joining us today.
I appreciate it.
So in your vast experience, you've experienced some change in your career too. You've been through a few transitions. Can you tell us a little bit about what that experience has been like for you? What kind of change have you gone through?
I can certainly, although I do just teach on the topic, I certainly have experienced it myself, so I can definitely share some real life stories and experiences. So I've had 4 career changes. I started in sales, then I moved into marketing. I have a couple of degrees in business and in training and development. I have been in coaching. I'm currently still a coach in training and development and consulting. I've been downsized 3 times myself.
Okay.
So I can certainly speak from very personal experiences when I do support others through similar changes.
So that's very helpful to know because you've internalized that. You know what those feelings are like,
Absolutely.
Particularly when change is brought upon you. So can you tell me a little bit more about what that's like? What's the feeling? What are the emotional elements that happen when someone is, and there are many different terms for it, whether it's transition, downsized, terminated, let go, released into the wild.
Released into the wild.
Why do you think that's such a shocking or such a difficult experience for people?
Well, as you alluded to, Susan, most people want to choose. They want to feel that they have a choice and they want some level of control. So clearly when someone has been told their job's gone away, and frankly that's one of the biggest fears for many people is to lose their job, they go into a state of denial. So there's an element of shock, there's panic, anxiety. So those are all natural immediate experiences that you would have potentially. Even if it's wanted change, that provokes anxiety and fear and very intense emotions. Now people do go through a journey of change, and I do address this, and as I support my clients through this process, that it's not easy. And so there's an element of resistance that sometimes, again, people show frustration and anger. Well, how could this happen to me? So they're in that state of free fall, and most people don't like to be in free fall. We love certainty. We love a certain level of predictability. I mean, think about it. Most people love to take the same route to work in the morning,
Yes.
like just little routines that we become comfortable with.
There's consistency in that, right?
Absolutely.
And I think the underlying thing too is the element of fear.
Oh, yes.
The fear of the unknown, or the fear of, now what? What do I do with this? What kind of a space am I in? How will I be seen? In the last probably 10 years or so, or even in the last 5, I think there's been a significant change that's happened globally, but also in the Canadian marketplace. And with the economic crisis that we had in 2008, there's been a pretty significant ripple effect both in the US and in Canada. What has been your experience? What are you seeing within our economy, whether it's at the corporate level or small business, in terms of the impact and how that's affecting people?
Well, there are impacts on so many levels. I'm going to focus on the human resources, on the impact on people, and sometimes that gets forgotten in the earnestness to be more efficient, to be more productive. Technology has helped us in so many ways, but technology has also caused impacts on people potentially losing their jobs. We're able to be more efficient. Technology is never going to go away, but it's in the treatment of people and continuing to value our people despite the efficiencies that we try to create through the technological influencers, through and so of course economic factors with the recession in the last number of years. Many organizations have struggled, and frankly I found some organizations using the recession and using some of the economic challenges as almost as an excuse to not continue to invest in their people, to scale back on things like training and development, on helping people upskill so that they can continue to be resilient. And so the last number of years have been extremely difficult for people, both on a personal level because of the impacts it's had on their families, on a professional level because again their jobs may have changed or completely gone away. We want progress, but we can't forget that it is our human resources that allow us to remain competitive. And in fact, progressive organizations totally get that. They get that despite the things you introduce in your organization, you have to treat your people like gold. And they do that by continuing to support them, by giving them the sometimes career management support that they need, especially if their job's gone away or maybe they've been demoted somehow. And so helping them deal with the emotionality of the impact of that. And so they are able to continue to support them despite the challenges.
Okay. That's a really helpful point. And we're just going to take a quick commercial break. When we come back, Nahla's going to tell us a bit more about if you're someone who's going through that type of change, what you can do to help right the boat, deal through the dips and the transitions far better. Thank you. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Authentik You. I'm your host, Susan Cranston, and I'm delighted to be here with my guest, Nahla Kor from Kor Capabilities Consulting. We've just been talking about the experience that many people go through, or some people have experienced, as a result of the economic downturn, and organizations making changes around their staffing requirements and looking for efficiencies. And so my question to Nahla, hi Nahla,
Hi.
is what advice would you give someone who is going through downsizing or experiencing a situation where they've had their employment contract terminated? What would you tell them? Absolutely.
So what I would say is stop. I know it feels counterintuitive, but stop and think of what just happened. It's an opportunity, sort of see it as that fork in the road. It's an opportunity to reflect on where you've come from, what just happened, where do you want to go? So take a breath and surround yourself by people who are going to support you through this very difficult time. Again, the initial reaction is usually shock and anxiety. We're not making rational decisions and thinking very clearly during that stage. So I would really encourage people to take time to reflect, assess what their skills and talents are, what their interests are. Sometimes people don't even give themselves that permission when they are employed because they're making the paycheck, they're living the lifestyle. And of course, the higher you are in an organization, the more you may feel you're losing financially, perhaps status, etc. So really take that opportunity to reflect and make really inspired decisions, take inspired action, as opposed to sometimes when I do work with clients who are in that state of free fall, as I mentioned, they're absolutely petrified, so they leap to the next opportunity that shows up, and they're making decisions that are not thoroughly thought out, perhaps. Again, because we're so desirous of that certainty, we don't give ourselves that time and that opportunity to say, what should I be doing?
Well, I think sometimes it's the reality of the fact that this was done to them,
Right.
that they didn't make the choice, even though in the example I gave about Steve Jobs earlier, it turned out to be the best thing for him in his career, even though at the time, and this is a point I want to delve into a little bit more with you, when people are going through that and you're saying they're not making good decisions, how much does the element of embarrassment,
that's huge.
How does that play in, and how do you deal with that? How would you coach someone around dealing with that?
Well, frankly, I remember the last downsizing I had was 10 years ago before I decided to start my own business is, wait a minute, like me? Why me? And so there is that sense of feeling targeted, and there is embarrassment, there's shame. I mean, even though it's very common and it happens to so many people, and I think we would be hard-pressed to know anybody that hasn't been impacted on some level in their job. So it's become, sadly, more of the norm. But there is that element of initial embarrassment, and how do I tell my family, and how do I introduce myself, because again, so much of our identity is attached to our jobs and our status, and now who am I? So you're into that place of soul searching, and that brings with it a lot of discomfort and perhaps some of the greatest insight. So I don't want to paint change as this really negative thing. Initially it feels negative, and again, it feels like something's been done to us, but I've seen people transform their careers in brilliant ways. And especially when you're going through large things like mergers and acquisitions, you may have large-scale downsizing, and people are not necessarily terminated right away. And again, how people conduct themselves as they're being exited out of an organization is very key.
Talk to us about that. What is that? Why is that important when they're sort of waiting for maybe a transition to happen?
And sometimes people have been able to reposition themselves in organizations, and they're the ones that tend to maintain their grace and their dignity. Yes, sometimes people will lash out, they'll be angry, they'll demonstrate that in the workplace. And although I encourage leaders to cut people some slack, especially when they're in this place of turmoil, you don't want to be doing career-limiting things like yelling at your manager, or not showing up to work, and really the people that I've seen transform themselves tend to have maintained that level of dignity and grace despite the difference, and that kind of what differentiates sometimes people.
That can be so difficult though, right?
Yes.
Because when it's personal and it's happening to you, you may not even realize, and that's another piece I want to talk to you about, is emotional intelligence and how we deal with that functioning of our emotions and our self-awareness.
Yes.
So with that though, when someone is going through a change, or they're anticipating that they could be released from an organization, it's what you're saying is it's so important to sort of keep being aware of your emotions, to try to stay calm. And that reminds me of another little quote that I often think about. Worrying is like rocking in a rocking chair. You can do it all you want, but you're not going to go anywhere, right? So
right.
You're basically
you just get dizzy.
You just get dizzy, and it's sort of wasted energy to do that. But that's hard, right? So
it is hard.
Is there, do you deal with people too that are going through transition? Do they come to you, or is it generally after they've been through something where change has impacted them?
Sometimes it's just prior, they're sensing that something's going on. So again, that's the worst place, is that, is it going to happen? When is the shoe going to fall? They've heard rumors perhaps, especially in a large organization, rumors can flow very, very fast, and many of them may be wrong, but some of them are true. So there's that sense of anxiety. So people will come, and that's one of the strategies actually I recommend, is that people do seek a coach. They seek someone who's objective. So family's not always necessarily the best people to go to. They can be there as a support system from a moral, you can do it, I'll be right there behind you, versus a coach who can really support them through some of that emotional state. And so you touched on the piece around emotional intelligence.
Yes, let's talk a little bit more about that.
That's, in essence, describes our emotional and social functioning, and sometimes that can be challenged when we are in those intense emotional states. So emotional intelligence is about our ability to be self-aware, to be able to self-reflect and understand how we land on others, how we impact people through our behaviors and our actions.
How people see us, perhaps?
How people see us, the way we project. And of course, during change, there's a lot of stress. When we're under stress, people show up in very, very different ways, sometimes not so pretty. Sometimes people shut down and go inward and they withdraw, so we need to pay attention to that. Sometimes people just lash out. So again, people will cut you some slack for so long, but you're going to burn your goodwill very quickly if you're not able to manage your emotions well, especially during difficult.
To work through the dip, right?
To work through that dip resistance before you get to, okay, I can make this change.
So a lot of what we talk about in the show is people that step out of their comfort zone.
Yes.
And somehow they're able to make that leap of faith.
Yes.
You're an excellent example of that, and that's why when I met you, and I thought you'd be wonderful for me to feature on a blog and to bring on the show, because you were able to go through that. Like you said, you've been transitioned at least 3 times where you had that, and now you started up your own private practice.
Yeah.
So what was that? What was sort of the pivotal moment when you thought, I can do this, I can step outside of the comfort zone and make that leap? What was that about?
So I'll be totally honest with you. I probably would not have gone in business on my own had I not been downsized 10 years ago. And that was the impetus. I was at that fork in the road.
So you had the fork in the road,
I had
and that
the fork
was it,
in the
right?
road, and I had to really do a whole lot of introspective reflecting.
Oh, hold that thought.
Okay.
We'll be right back in a moment, and Nahla will share more of her expertise and insights on change and emotional intelligence. Stay with us. Hi, and welcome back to Authentik You. I'm Susan Cranston, and I'm your host. And I'm delighted to be here with Nahla Kor from Kor Capabilities Consulting. And Nahla and I have just been talking about making that leap of faith when you're forced to step outside of your comfort zone. And that's happened to you about 10 years ago, you shared with me. What were some of the great learnings you had that someone else might be able to relate to when you've taken that leap of faith and sort of pushed yourself outside of your comfort zone?
So I have to be totally authentic because this is what the show's about. I have to say I was absolutely petrified. I had no idea what I was leaping into. I went from having a really great job, earning a steady income, to deciding to start my own practice. So I really had to stop and think about, what are my strengths? What is it that I really want to do, and do that soul searching? So I decided to start my own coaching and consulting practice. I've been doing that for 10 years. Again, I had to be really real. So we have to be very realistic about what we think we can offer. What is our value add? And not being too modest about that. I think women sometimes, we almost apologize for being bold and telling people what we're good at. So whether you're starting your own business or whether you're trying to find another job within another organization, you have to be so clear about what you bring to the table. What are your strengths? How do you add value? And what differentiates you from everyone else out there on the market? Again, whether it's for another employment or whether it's to establish yourself as a consultant or whatever your desired profession is.
So you've really got to dig down deep.
You got to dig deep.
You've got to think about what your strengths are.
Absolutely.
But also what you like to do. You know, when we were on the break, you were talking about how you wanted to be a sommelier, which is someone who's basically a wine expert.
I love wine. I love wine.
But
however,
you didn't pursue that, right?
No, so you have to be realistic. So sometimes interests are just that. They're interests, they're hobbies, they're things we do that give us pleasure, but they may not necessarily be realistic in the perspective of generating regular income. So I have 2 kids I need to put through university in the next few years.
Right.
And so I need to be able to align my skills and my talents immediately in terms of the services I can provide others, and I can continue to enjoy wine and learn more about wine without necessarily becoming a sommelier.
So you can probably go on trips,
I can
right?
go on
As
trips,
a result of
but
that.
Can I make money at that? Probably not.
Probably not.
No. So people have to really get real with their passions. Yes, we tell people to pursue your passion. You can do anything. Yes, that's true. And then we need to overlay the reality part of that.
Okay.
What's it going to take to get there?
What's it going to take to get there? Yes. So what did it take to get there for you in terms of networking? I'm thinking about how we met through the Chamber of Commerce and the Women's Leadership Committee.
I'm so glad you asked that.
Were there people that helped you
move
forward and feel more comfortable in the new space that you found yourself in?
And I wish I had done this more earlier. In 10 years, if I could do things over again, I would have asked for help sooner. I thought I could do everything by myself. We're not good at everything, especially in terms of running a business. I love the coaching, consulting, training piece of my work. The administrative part, not so good. So that was a struggle. So really surround yourself with people who are going to support you in the ways that you need best, and to ask for it, not to be shy, to network, to go out there and ask for referrals. You're never too busy for a referral. Some people say, well, I don't want to look desperate. Well, it's not about being desperate. It's about asking people, if you saw value in what I've given you, do you think someone else would benefit from my services?
So it's the call to action there.
It's the call to
It's really
action.
important. So the key learnings there, what I'm taking just before we wrap up, this segment has gone so quickly,
It has.
is that it's important to really think about your strengths.
Yes.
And make sure you're realistic about those in terms of what your financial obligations might be as well. Reach out, ask for help, network, and the call to action around saying, is there something I can do to help you in terms of gaining new business and asking for those referrals?
You've got it.
Good. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
It's a delight to know you. I wish you much continued success, and I hope perhaps you'll come back another time on our show.
Thanks, Susan.
Good.
I'd love to.
So I want to thank our viewers for joining us today. There are many things you could have done with the last half an hour, so spending time with us, we hope you found it valuable. We also have a website called Authentik You, and that's Authentic with a K. And if you'd like to check that out, if you have comments or you're interested in being featured on the show or featured on our blog, we'd love to hear from you. We're also on Twitter at Authentik You. And, again, let us know if you have something you want to tweet about relating to the show. That would be fabulous. I also want to take a moment to thank our fabulous crew here at Rogers TV Cable 20. They do a great job. I love working with them, along with our sponsors and our Authentik You team. And particularly today, the jewelry I'm wearing from Distinct Boutique. And I want to thank Scott Keller, who's our hairstylist, and Jen Hovinga, who does our makeup, and David Boyes for designing this set. So thanks everyone for joining us, and remember, it's always a great day to be your authentic self.